It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems and have the great pleasure of working with employers all over the world. All right, now y'all gonna have to go back to the segment right before this. We were hype, and I should also have prefaced that episode with when I drink my Nespresso, I am extra hype. I mean, those are topics I would have been hype about anyway. But really, what we were opening up with and framing up is that we're really in this wishy-washiness period around DEI, and we absolutely should still be caring about DEI. It still matters, and despite all the
hmm
headlines that are often incredibly misleading about companies rolling DEI back, the substance of what we're seeing is that that's not really the case. And so, what we are really circling back to in this episode, which pains me, y'all, to have to circle back to this deeply, is what is the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion? And it pains me to talk about the business case because we've been having this conversation since 2015 when McKinsey put out why diversity matters. We have long since had, meaning 10 years ago, and this data continues to be updated, data, not opinion, on why DEI is good for business.
hmm
Now you hear me talking a little elementary because I'm pissed that we have to keep talking about this, but we want there to be clarity. So, Shante, why do we keep talking about this?
Because people don't get it. Which is like, okay, then you start to think you're crazy. Like, wait, I think I feel like the definitions are clear, but maybe not. I think
Willfully
there's
blind.
yeah, I think there's some of that that happens, but I think we still need to talk about the business case for it because people need to constantly be like grounded in something, right? Like they
Right.
get caught up, right? They get caught up in the whatever media frenzies out here, whatever legal situations out here, political, whatever it is. And so I think people are constantly having to come back to their why, just like in life in general. Like, why do I do what I do? Why do I live how I live? Why do I, pursue what I pursue? This is just a similar situation where the business has to constantly reorient and ground themselves in their why. Why does DEI matter for my organization or whatever
Mm-hmm.
you call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion, whatever other words that they use for these things. Why does this particular thing matter? And I
Right.
think that is just I think the nature of things. People want to make sure that they're aligned with whatever is important to them. And so coming back to the business case, it's like, okay, let's constantly remind ourselves on why this is important. So
Yeah. And I think that constant reminding is probably why it's not happening, right? And again, this is not just about DEI. I think we always try to be clear that leaders these days are triaging on a daily basis. There's a million different things and priorities that people are trying to get them to say, my thing is the most important thing. So we don't walk around taking personally if leaders are not so sure. That's why we have this podcast. We're here to be supportive of it, right? But I think because there are not, and we see this regularly, because there are not intentional communication plans to constantly remind people what we've done in this work and why we're doing it and keeping people abreast. It's like you have these fits and starts of like blasts of this is our DEI strategy, this is our DEI mission, and then you hear nothing for months. And then somebody gets upset and then there's something that comes out. But again, when we go back to sort of what we were getting at before, DEI is a way of doing things. Right? It's not a program, it's not a tactic. And so
mhm.
with a way of doing something, you have to naturally constantly be talking about it. And from what we see, these companies are not naturally talking about any sort of workplace culture issue. So I think that does contribute to, well, why are we doing this again? And it's like, because you told me once 12 months ago why we were doing this. And so I don't really understand. And again, I think it's that creating the container for it. But to go back
Mhm.
to something we touched upon on the previous segment, just so that we're like really being thoughtful on the tie through, like we're saying, DEI is a way of doing things. It's not it shouldn't just be a department and people, one person or five people just trying to make it work for the whole place. It's an overlay. And so when we talk about it, just from framing it up on that standpoint, because it is a business function, it's a business process to help you get greater innovation, retention, higher profitability, right? This is why we are talking about in the previous segment, where does it fit? Who should be responsible for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your thought there? Does it fit in HR? Does it fit somewhere else? Like, where do you see it going?
Yeah, putting it in HR limits it. Of course, we're talking about people, and a lot of the work that we do impacts people, but there's a broader application for DEI outside of just the people, which is why there's a case for it to not just exist in HR. So if it's outside of that human resources function, you can have visibility and be able to impact marketing, uh, sales, right? Like biz dev, like you can apply these principles across the business, and that's where transformation happens. If you just keep it in its little pocket over here, you don't get the full benefit of DEI as you would if it was kind of outside and being able to play with everybody, I think.
Yeah. So when you think about it from that standpoint, I was looking at a note from something you said yesterday. If you could
Mm,
expand on, since we view it as a way of working, you were like, everyone, I had it in caps because you were hype when you said it.
sorry.
Everyone needs to be retooled. What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, if we're looking at it as, it takes me back to what these leaders always say when we're with them. They
Mm,
think of it as something else that they have to do, and it's not something else that they have to do. It's just a slight shift in mindset. It's a slight shift in how in the way you approach whatever problem you have to solve. It's broadening your aperture, right? So that's what we're asking you to do. But people could get so fixed, especially folks who are used to doing things a certain way. This is how we've always done it. We hear that all the time, right? So people who are fixed in that way, um, we're asking everyone to be able to just open it up a bit and be able to apply these principles across their business, whatever part of the business that they are responsible for and that they have that they impact. And so, in order to do that, it's just a new skill that you need to learn. There's more learning and development that needs to happen. There are more courses that you need to take, just as you would if you wanted to advance in your career in general. Right? Like this is just something else that you need to add into. Okay, I probably need to take some time to figure this part out or look at that. But people don't. They see it as someone else's responsibility, or they see it as
mm-hmm.
someone, which is the danger of keeping it in its own little pocket. And it's not. Everyone has a responsibility here, and everyone needs to be able to understand how to apply these tools and these principles within their organization based on what the enterprise organization company values and how they want it deployed throughout their organization, right? Because it can look different for different organizations, but it has to make sense within your environment.
It's a skill set.
Yeah.
We're talking about improving your skill set. So if we take a HR process as an example, or HR sort of issue of retention or attrition, right? Most every company you come across, especially larger companies, are going to be tracking attrition. How many people quit? What's your turnover rates, right? Those are all those synonymous terms. And we know there's a whole calculation methodology for how much turnover costs. It can like there's many different averages, but sort of a standard is you think about the cost of turnover being sort of 4 to 6 months of the person's salary who left, right? There are more precise ways to do it, but that just gives you an eyeball. So if you're thinking about, gosh, we got to control our people expenses, so we really need people to stay, unless they're not performing or whatever the case may be, is how we run into so many managers that are ill-equipped to help people stay. I mean, regardless of whether you're overlaying DEI. I mean, we did focus groups in Q4 with people managers, and every single session and multiple comments in those sessions is, well, we don't know how to do, we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to implement the DEI initiatives. And that is not uncommon. We get
Right.
these beautiful words on the page way up top. Your CEO and your executives are like, yes, we like these words. And then nothing gets distilled, like
Nothing
nothing gets
happens.
trickled down. We're just happy about words. And then it's stunning how often we interview senior leaders or like people right below the C-suite, and they're like, yeah, we're not really sure what the strategy is. We interviewed 20 senior leaders one-on-one in addition to those focus groups. And every single one of them was like, we don't really know what the strategy is. We are not really equipped to develop talent. Like, it's not even just not equipped to develop diverse talent. We're not equipped to develop talent
in general.
So it's that piece where I think this moving a million miles an hour and it's better and more and quicker, we got to do more things. There's so many important steps being skipped. And so I remember, and I say back in the day, because I've been a lawyer now for over 20 years, which is kind of crazy, but back in the day, the amount of focus that companies put on leadership development and management development, and not just throwing someone who's never managed people into a big job where they then have to learn how to manage people, and then they have to learn how to develop a strategy, and then they have to do all these things all at one time. Like, there was these leadership programs, right, that you're in. If you have to go through maybe a year before you can be promoted, or whatever the case may be. Is those steps were critical, right? They weren't just nice to have. When you look back at some of the people that you've worked with over your career who had that kind of training, the way they approach the work is so different. There's a more intuitiveness to the fact that, okay, Shanté is not the same as Natalie, and what it takes to motivate Shanté is going to be different to what it takes to motivate Natalie. I mean, I've talked about this before. I used to watch that with my dad. When my dad was a district manager for a pharmaceutical sales company, the amount of pride he took in managing his team and being thoughtful about what it was like, it really stood out, because it was like, he was so proud about it. He would be so proud when his sales reps got promoted past him, right? Because for him, that was a measure of success. And there's just something about that creates loyalty. It creates the psychological safety. It creates innovation, because it's like, then you feel like your employer cares about you as a human being. Not that you have to satisfy all my needs as an employer, but that you at least care that I exist. Right now, I don't feel like most of the employees we come across feel that way.
No, because people want to be acknowledged. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be, right. Like, I'm here. I matter. Right. And I think that I love the example that you used with your father, because it sounds like he would see people for who they were, and he would see all of them, not just, blinders onto they do really good work in this particular area, but he saw them as like a whole person, and was willing to invest and develop the whole person. And I think that is in terms of leadership, inclusive leadership, that is really what we're asking people to do here, is really just expand how they lead and how they manage, just be more inclusive.
But this is not even new. Let's just be clear, though. This is not new. From the beginning of time, right? Like, that people, I'm sure, have wanted to be seen and heard. These things that we're talking about are not new things, right? What may be new are certain trends. What may be new, like, meaning like we have, the way AI has evolved, right? That's new, and how you deal with that in the workplace might be new. But the basic concepts that we're talking about are so basic, and they've always been the case. Anything you want someone to do well, you need to teach them how to do it. You want people to lead well, to get good results, you have to teach them how to do it. And so that's, I think, where I love that retooling comment. Really, you should have originally been tooled this way, but fine. It's like, but again, goes back to, what does success look like for you? So, so given that this segment is really about the business case, I think the first thing is, where does it fit in the business, which we just talked about. I'm firmly in the camp of some kind of change management position that is that is viewed as a business function and business role, because this is really about how you get change and how you get people moving in a similar direction on behaviors. And then the other part is the money, right? Like, isn't that what this is all comes down to?
It does.
And why do we know that? We know that DEI has a strong correlation to higher profits, in part based on, again, this long-term work that McKinsey's been doing. At last look, their revenue comparisons, meaning, like, one of the things that they've been able to look at from, publicly held companies, is that organizations with diversity in terms of background, like ethnicity, and the like, are 36% more likely to outperform their peers, right?
Hmm.
So that's a lot of money, actually, right? So we actually did some calculations just with some mock data on what would that look like if I did hit that 36% more. So
Mm-hmm.
that would say a company in a lower quartile, meaning that they don't really prioritize DEI. We say that they earned $368 million in a year. That means a company doing it well in the top quartile of DEI could be earning upwards of $500 million, right? So if we're looking at, again, can we guarantee that exact result? Of course not. But the fact that there is significant amount of data to show that being the case, that there's that big difference, to me, that's like a no-brainer on like, yeah, let's get this right. When you look at profit comparisons, you're looking at somewhere around a potential of a 20%, 25% more profit by those who do DEI well, like in the top quartile of companies, than those in the lower quartile. So if we just look at that in dollars, if there's one company who doesn't do DEI well and their profit for a year was $92 million, it's possible that the company who does do DEI well will have a profit of $125 million. And I would prefer the $125 million, honestly, because
Absolutely.
there's a lot you can do with that 30 million or so delta there.
Yeah.
I think another stat that we found that I thought was interesting is Morgan Stanley did an analysis that companies that do DEI well recover from economic downturns 2.4 times faster. And you're like, oh, that sounds good. What is that? Well, what is 2.4 times? So again, based on our research, there's sort of a baseline about 24 months, a baseline of how long it can take to recover from some kind of economic downturn. And what this is telling us is that it's possible when you do DEI well that you'd recover in 10 months, right? So that's the 2.4 times faster than the average. So these are real, like, what are these, when you hear these numbers, what does that do for you? What are you thinking?
I mean, listen, what's the basic premise of having a business, right? They teach you this. This is business 101, right? Maximize profits, minimize, what is it? Like your expenses or whatever it is, your loss, whatever. Like that's what they teach in any business class ever. That's the first thing you learn. So if you're telling me that by doing this well, I can increase by whatever the amount is, or I can make more money, or I can recover fast, so I don't have as much loss as say someone who hasn't. I mean, it's a no-brainer to
So
me.
why doesn't the conversation start here? If, like you're saying, business 101 is maximize profits, minimize losses. Why are we not starting there? Why is it, what happened?
People, no, I think so. What that? Yeah, no, I think that's a big question because also caught up in this is the conversation around power that people don't want to talk about.
Okay, so let's talk about it.
So I think but then you get into the historical things about like how this country was founded and who has what and all these things. And so I think a lot of folks, this is just my own personal opinion. Again, I don't have any data to support this, but in order to do DEI well, there is you have to shift your mindset away from being limited or fixed. Like you have to look at it broader. I mean, that there's an opportunity here for everyone, and we want this for everyone. If folks have power and now you're asking them to share power or to at least not take as much, then that can be seen as a threat. And so you see it with a lot and this is maybe not as directly related, but we have this conversation a lot around billionaires. Like, why do you need all that money? There's so much out here that needs to be done. Do
Right.
you really need that? So, and it's like, do we need another X this or Y that? Why don't we open up these opportunities for other people? But I think in doing that, because people have a mindset of binary, if this happens, then I lose out on this, or I don't get as much of that, or I miss this thing, then people get threatened by that. And that's part of doing this work is really understanding, okay, what's the impact of creating a space where more and more people, it's more competition. And so if you have more competition,
so then let's
No, I'm
apply
going.
the
I'm going off. Sorry, it's like a
no
lot
no
of
no
moving
no.
processes in
But
my
you're
head.
good though. But let's just bring facts to it because I
Okay.
understand like we're
Yeah.
absolutely not interested in going down the historical road because we're just
Yeah. Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about the business case of DEI today in 2025.
Yeah.
So if we look at the facts today, the vast majority of CEOs of publicly held companies, of large companies, are white men, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. That's
These are
not
facts.
conjecture. We know that. So that means if you look at the CEO position, white men hold a disproportionate amount of power in running large companies in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So then going back to how you started this, is this about maintaining power or is this about making the most money possible? Or is this about maintaining power and making the most money possible, right? Like I think that that is the question that leaders need to be asking themselves because as we have again if you look at if you dig into some of these folks who do DEI well that are part of like the McKinsey study, to me, it signals leaders who understand that they become more powerful when they're able to make the most money and really galvanize their teams to do their best work, right? So it is to me a real philosophical question about again, what does success look like for you? Being holding and maintaining power forever and ever at all costs, or understanding I actually become more because power is infinite. There is no boundary on how powerful anyone can be. You've seen that you see that with all sort of the political disturbances happening throughout the world right now, right? Of people, governments being overthrown or people being forced to resign, and right there's no limit. So it's sort of like when I'm listening to you talk, it's like okay, so are you facing your demons? Are you being real with yourself? Are you being real with yourself?
The level of delusion that people live with nowadays. Of course not.
Right.
Of course they aren't. But yeah, no, I just think that it's important to really, but that's the question that you got to sit with yourself. Like, be real with yourself about it, right? Like, what are you really trying
And
to
where you
accomplish and what are you trying
fall
to do?
and where you fall like I think to me where the struggle for all of us that are not in the positions to make the decisions on these things is it never feels like these companies are taking a real position, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't ever feel like it's coming from a place of authenticity. Like it feels like it's coming from a check the box place. And the thing that I think if you look through all of our episodes that we're always saying is that employees want authenticity. They want the truth. If the truth is not something they like, I feel like most people we see can handle it. But what is it, right? It's this constant living in a haze and vagary and ambiguity that's not needed, right? But I think it's like that not being real with yourself from the outset. What kind of legacy do you want as a CEO? What is it that you want people to know about how you led? What do you want the period of time where this was the
Right,
ship you were running to represent?
right.
Because I think all of that means that gets you to a more holistic why that actually means something. And the last stat I want to throw out here along those lines is from Glassdoor data, which Glassdoor is, one of the sort of biggest collectors of people data, especially those who are job seekers. 76% of job seekers want workplace diversity when they're thinking about where they go. So it's kind of one of the things that's coming up for me right now is not, when you don't have a stable what's your legacy, what's your why, it's like you're sort of caving to like the loudest voice in the room at the
Always.
moment.
Oh yeah.
And so then if you're looking at the fact that most businesses need people to run and people are telling you this is what they want, like again, it's like are you just kowtowing to just, the loudest 5%? And again, there's not the 24% of job seekers who aren't looking for it, they may end up in a workplace and say, I don't really care about this stuff. And that's okay. Because if you establish what your way of doing thing is, they get to choose whether they're going to do it, be there or not be there, right? It's not
Hmm.
about trying to
Hmm.
satisfy 100% of everybody. It's about picking a position that moves you forward and having the resolve to stick to it.
But I think that brings up the point of aligning it to your values as an organization. It has to be important because it's connected to why you do business. Otherwise, it's going to feel that way. It's going to feel like something off to the side. It's going to feel like something we discard because there's no weight to it. We're not,
Right.
again, you're not grounded in it. You're not, it's not important to the way in which you work. And so it's like you, in order for it to make sense, which brings us back to the beginning, it has to align with why and how you do business. And that's the only way it's going to work. And that's your why, really.
Right. I mean, it's like I have all these supplements in my drawer, right? Vitamin D, probiotics, hyaluronic acid, fish oil. They're only as good as they go in my body, right? The fact that they're just in the drawer, I mean, they're pretty useless in the drawer. The
Right.
same thing, like just because you say, oh, I'm committed to DEI, if you don't actually do anything to bring it to life, it's just sitting in a drawer. It's not valuable, and you're never going to see the value of it, and you're going to always question the value of it because you never actually put the effort in to like make it work. And so that reminds me I need to take my supplements today. But yeah, so I think, there's that. So if we kind of recap here in terms of like what are the key takeaways from understanding the business case for diversity. I mean, DEI is not just a value, it's a strategy for survival.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do it well or prioritize it in some kind of way, you will be left behind, especially in this ever-evolving global workplace where the demands and the needs evolve and grow on a daily basis. Number 2, we have to shift the narrative. DEI is a lens, not a program, right? It is a way through which we look at our work to ensure that we have the best ideas possible, we have fairness, and people are set up in a way where they want to come and bring, themselves to this work, right? And then the last piece of this is there's a cost to ignoring DEI, right? And particularly in our world around attracting and retaining talent. So while there's many other costs we could point to, you open yourself up to lawsuits. And if you don't care about that, you open yourself up to be bashed on the internet. And if you don't care about that, you're going to go in your pocket over and over every time someone leaves because it's expensive to account for turnover. So we hope once and for all, we can close this discussion on the business case for diversity.
Doubt it.
Shanté,
I doubt it. I doubt it.
I said hope, girl. We can have a hope. And we got more. So what we really are going to dig into our next segment is the impact on employees from all this wishy-washiness. DEI is gone, DEI is here. What does that do to people on a daily basis? So stay with us. We'll be back.
Thanks, everybody.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.